This is Dateline News and Conversation. This will be an end of the year review with my friend, an incredible blogger and analyst, the one and only Garland Nixon. Garland, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm always honored to come on with you, Regis. I appreciate the great work that you do,
Well,
and I
thank you.
learn a lot from it, I might add.
Thank you, my friend. Uh, you know, there's a lot to talk about, but then there's not a lot to talk about as we look at the end of 2024. I want to focus on three things tonight with you because these three things are important to me, and I think they're important to a lot of people. The first thing, Garland, I want your take on Israel's future. They are continuing the genocide in Palestine, in Gaza. Um, they have a plan for the greater Israel. And what I'm reading and what I'm hearing from friends of mine who have been covering this, Israel is on the verge of an economic and social collapse. So, Garland, how do you see this unfolding as we come to the end of 2024 and the beginning of a brand new year in just 2 days? Your thoughts?
Well, two things, Israel and Ukraine, I always say these are the twin conflicts, right? And there's so many things that are similar, and one of them is they're both just welfare states. Neither one of them have an economy, and both of them exist only because the U.S. Pays all of their bills right now. The Israel, I was talking to someone who's very familiar with what's going on in Israel, and they were telling me that Israel claims when their claims for their GDP, their gross domestic product, one of the things they do is all of these people who have left Israel, right? They're gone all over the place, tons of them in Cyprus, you name it. And whenever they use their ATM card that goes through Israel's bank, they claim that as part of the GDP. So they're cooking the books. They're in far worse economic condition than they let on. So while there's a discussion about, oh, Israel's winning, they're taking land, they're doing this and that. It is now clear that there is no Israel, that Israel is just an economic, military appendage of the U.S. It's just in the same way that Ukraine is, right? So what happens to Israel after this is over, which in a way it can never be over because the people in that region aren't going to give up the fight. But what happens when Israel tries to go back to having some kind of normalcy in their life and nobody in around the world wants to buy their stuff? Nobody wants to invest money there because if you're a company and you invest a bunch of money in Israel, people are going to boycott you. It's going to be a pariah state. And at some point, as we can all see with what's happening with BRICS, what's happening with the U.S. debt, and on, that the U.S. is heading towards another 2008 style collapse or worse. What happens when the U.S. cannot afford to float Israel anymore? Israel is destined for an economic death. Ultimately, I think it's destined to come apart. So many of the people in Israel have dual and triple citizenship, and they're going to leave. And a lot of people aren't going to come back. Israel's just a mess right now, and I don't see it getting cleaned up anytime soon or fixing itself. I think we're looking at one way or the other, the end of Israel as we know it. It's existing. You know what I mean? It's almost like if you've ever known a person who had a really bad addiction problem who couldn't fix it, and you watch them spin out of control, and everybody around them can see, oh my gosh, now you've had another car accident. Oh, you've lost your job. Oh, your wife left you. And you see one thing after the other, and you see them going down and they can't hear it. That's Israel. We're watching Israel fall apart. Are they doing a lot of damage and killing a lot of people while it happens? Yes, but they are in the same way that the U.S. is doing that in other places. Israel is destined to, um, I think, fall apart within the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. You mentioned a couple of things. America, United States, has been funding Israel. They've been funding the war against Russia in Ukraine. Garland, You mentioned BRICS. Uh, Donald Trump completely understands what BRICS is about. BRICS doesn't say it publicly that they're trying to get rid of the US dollar, but everything they're doing, trading in their own currencies, developing their own investment banks, really very clearly says they are done with the weaponizing of the US dollar and sanctions. Uh, so here's what I'd like to ask you about that. Uh, if that happens, and I think it's happening, there's no reversing it, the BRICS movement, the multipolarity that we already see as the New World Order, what do you think is going to happen to the United States economy? What is happening to it already? You know, I'm living in Russia, and the Russian economy is strong. Uh, you know, inflation is up a little bit, but there's no absence of fruit or goods or anything here, anything. But I hear from friends in America that things are getting very difficult. What are your thoughts on that as we come to the end of 2024?
Yeah, the U.S. is in a deep and serious trouble. And one of the things, I always bring up is pickup trucks. Because, as I've said, my dad was a longshoreman. He used to get a pickup truck every 2 to 3 years. He got another pickup truck. And, back in those days, those guys, a man had to have a pickup truck. You grew up in Maine, a man in his pickup truck, that's like a cowboy on his horse, right? That was the middle class can't afford pickup trucks anymore. New pickup trucks, 80, 90, $100,000. Working class people don't have that kind of money. It's $1,000, $1,500 a month. And then insurance. Somebody's paying 2,000, 2,500 bucks a month for a pickup truck and insurance. That's a house payment for people. So no, that's out. So we are already getting to creating an economic environment where things are here that people would need, pickup trucks and things, but they don't make enough money to afford the necessities of life, not just the luxuries, the necessities of life. And I think what we're seeing is the political ramifications of that. People are angry. Um, and the political situation, which is unstable, is reflecting the instability of the economic situation. And people are mad. I was the other day, I was just telling somebody, I was just walked in a Walmart. I don't go to Walmart much, but I had to go in because it was something I needed and it was quick. And I saw four young people, two men, two women in their early 20s, all Asian. The two guys had on MAGA hats, Make American Great Again hats with a Trump thing on the back. Now, not to judge that Trump's good, bad, or different. You never saw that in the past. Like some young people walking around with a MAGA hat on. But young people are angry. They'll try anything because their future is screwed, their present is screwed, and they're looking at a system that doesn't work for them. We've always thought, oh, our kids will live better than the parents, generation after generation. And now we're looking at a generation where the future, not just the future, the present is looking bleak for young people. So the United States is getting in a situation where the young people in the next generation are angry, untrustworthy of the elite, the power, the media is collapsing. CNN, MSNBC has lost what, like 45 to 47% of his audience in the last 2 months. This country is politically unstable. But I think the one thing that's happening is that people are recognizing now that there is a ruling elite class that doesn't have our best interest in hand. And I think the pushback is starting. Can I add one more thing? We would hear from the liberal class that that the Trump supporters are all just a bunch of brainwashed zombies that Trump will do anything that Trump says. But we're seeing now there's even an argument amongst the MAGA class because a couple of the so-called MAGA billionaires have said, yes, we're all for these H-1B visas that bring in more workers from other countries. And the MAGA rank and file working class said, we don't like that either. And now there's even a fight. And Trump says, hey, I'm going with the billionaires. The MAGA working class said, we don't like that. So what we're seeing is even Trump, for all the discussion that we were told that he was some kind of a puppet master for a bunch of brainwashed zombies, People have had enough. And if Trump does not do what the people voted him in to do, they'll turn on him too. And I think that's a good thing.
Uh, I was going to talk about Trump, and the third point I want, but while we're on it,
Yeah.
uh, you know, people here in Russia, and everywhere I've been in the last couple of months, I've been to Moscow. I've been up into the Arctic to Archangel for a film festival. Everybody was asking me about Trump, and the questions they're asking is obviously, will Trump try to bring peace in Ukraine and make peace with Russia? Um, so while we're on the topic of Trump, do you think that Trump will be able to be a peace president? Or do you think there's going to be more of the same, which is wars of all kinds, economic, sanction, military around the world, and with them painting a big red target on China? What are your thoughts on what's coming with the Trump administration that's coming in?
Well, one thing, there's a big red target on Trump right now. Unfortunately, I'm an independent. I'm not in any of these parties, but I would far prefer, to be quite frank, I'd probably prefer Trump over Biden, even though, I don't necessarily support any of them. But I'll say this. I do believe that Trump will make an attempt to. I do believe that Trump will talk with the Russian leadership with respect, right? I think he'll talk to the leadership of various countries with respect. I was fortunate enough, I was hanging out with some people a few weeks back when Colonel Larry Wilkerson, we had dinner with him. I had dinner with him and some other people, and we were talking about this subject. And one of the things that he gave me some historical context. I won't get into all of that. But one of the things he talked about was Biden giving an edict to everybody in his administration. Nobody's allowed to talk to the Russians, and how dangerous that is, right? So, and what he said is basically, in a nutshell, and I agree with this. Look, you can whatever you want about Trump. He's got his weaknesses. But if you're talking, you have a chance. You know what I mean? If he says, "Look, I want a deal," and the Russians say, "I want a deal," let's talk about that. The truth is this: Trump's fight to get a deal ain't with the Russians. They want peace. They want a peaceful resolution. Before this started, they put forward a document and said, "Hey, let's talk about these issues on the document so we can have peace." They want peace. Clearly, Trump's saying, "Hey, I want this thing over quick." He wants peace. He don't want this mess, right? I'm not saying you're going to get it, but you have a chance at getting it if you have two sides that want peace. And he's going to be fighting the neocons here and the neocons there. But isn't it interesting that he's not going to be fighting with the Russians over peace? He's going to be fighting with them. So I don't know if he gets a deal. Right now, here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to go out on a limb and say, yeah, yeah, I'm guessing, but I think he gets a deal. Because if he gets in on the 20th, I'm not even sure that these crazy fascists aren't going to do God only knows what to even stop a change of government on the 20th. Look what they've done in South Korea. But um, the fact is he'll be talking to the Russian leadership with respect, and they're the Russian leadership are very smart people. And I think if they feel that they have an opportunity to get a deal that will be in the best interest of the Russian people and long term of the Russian leadership. Is it possible they may have to give up something that'll piss some people off? It's possible. It's possible. And if they do, based on the history that I've seen, Lavrov and Putin, the way what I've seen of these guys, if they make a deal and they say, "We think we'll take this deal," right? And I look at it and say, "Yeah, you're giving up too much." But I got to respect those guys because they're really smart guys. And I'll say, if you guys think it's okay, maybe yeah, people may not agree with it, but I'm sure you got other plans with other people. So I think that if Trump can get in on the 20th, not convinced of that he's got a chance to get the deal. And here's the big reason why. I keep going back to this. Everyone out there, read the op-ed that was written by Donald Trump Jr. and RFK Jr. And it was in Politico and it was in The Hill. And if you read that, here's what you know. that the Trump people do understand the conflict. If you read that, you know they understand the conflict in a way that the neocons could never even admit. And since they understand the conflict, they understand. And by the way, RFK Jr. has said he watches the Duran. They understand the damn conflict. And if they understand the conflict, they understand what is needed to end it. So they're not going into this thing with this stupid, crazy neocon. We have to crush the Russians and we have to, we're going to offer the Russians nothing and we'll get everything and the Russians will take it. They understand the truth. So I think they have a chance, I think, to get that. And that would be tremendous. What's the other interesting thing, too, is that Trump made the statement. He says, yes, I'm going to end the wars in Ukraine and the Middle East. And he said, and the Middle East will be easier. Ukraine will be harder. And what's interesting is, I think he's right. But I would have to say, and maybe I'm being overly optimistic. I'm not looking at this as optimistic. I'm trying to just read the tea leaves of what I've seen. I think the Trump administration's plans are to stop the um, military issues that they're dealing with and to focus on the U.S. Whether or not I'll even agree with their policies, probably a lot of them. I'm on the more lefty. I probably won't agree with a lot of their policies, but I do agree with anyone who says we got to end the wars and focus on the U.S. Maybe they'll do some things. I strong disagreement when it comes to the Middle East and Gaza, but if they're able to end that war, that conflict there, that's a good thing. Right now, it's very dangerous because I think the Biden administration is desperate. They're cornered animals, and God only knows what they'll do. And I think they're trying to do all kind of terrorist and all kind of terrible things to piss Russia off, to get Russia to do something before the 20th that makes it impossible to get a deal. And I think the Russians are far too smart to take the bait.
Uh, I agree. I want a fast rewind to go
Okay.
back to go back to when Trump, in his first time in office, met with Vladimir Putin in Helsinki. You remember that?
Hmm.
They talked for several hours. They came out, they did a joint press conference. Probably was a mistake. But in that press conference, both of them, but especially Trump, laid it all out how we were going to change the relationship with Russia. We're going to work with Russia on so many different levels. Trump, being a businessman, not a politician, saw Russia as a business deal for both sides. And Putin said, yes, we had a really wonderful meeting. We're looking forward to working with Donald. And he uses his name, Donald. He didn't say President Trump, he said Donald, like they really had a good relationship. And I think they did. But Garland, you remember, Trump didn't get back to his plane to return to the United States before John McCain, Lindsey Graham, the New York Post, the Washington Post, New York Times had pictures of him and were disparaging him as treasonous, as a Putin puppet, a Putin poodle. And he had no chance once he got back to the United States to act upon whatever he had told Vladimir Putin and whatever they agreed on. He did a 180-degree turn. He even leveled more sanctions on Russia, and he withdrew from the the last missile treaty that we had. So I think, Garland, and I want your thoughts on this. I think Trump really, in his heart, wanted to make peace with Russia, establish better relations with Russia. He said, I never would have got into the war in Ukraine. He said that. I would have never done that. So I think he was sincere. Now, this is the question that I have. Not many Russians are entertaining this because they really felt they moved on away from America towards this new multipolarity, towards the BRICS movement. What are your thoughts on whether Trump really sincerely wants to reestablish that relationship with Vladimir Putin that he established in his first administration?
I think Trump definitely wants to. Going by his rhetoric, going by a lot of things he definitely wants to, one of the things that's interesting is that the one of the arguments that the liberal class has made is Putin's a tough, he's a bad guy, Xi's a bad guy, uh, 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 the leader of North Korea, he's a bad guy, right? He's a bad guy. And Trump takes an interesting position and he says, they're all tough guys. Basically, I'll sum it up. They're tough guys, and so am I. I like tough guys. Your problem is not that they're tough guys, it's that you're weak. That's the position takes, right? It's like, because they're like, well, Russia kills people. He's like, we're no angels. What are you talking about? You know what I mean? It's like, this is international politics. Sometimes you're in charge of things. You got to take, the bull by the horns, and you got to be the tough guy. Your problem, Trump's argument is your problem is you're weak, and America needs the strong guy, and I'm strong. So I think for starters, Trump sees his relationships with these leaders that have been so demonized. I'll put it like this. These leaders have been demonized as the bad boys around the world. And Trump's position is, yeah, but the girls all like the bad boys, guys. I'm one of the bad boys. You know what I mean? That's the position he's taking. Sorry, guys. You guys are wimps. You talk all that crap, but the hot babes all like the bad boys. We're the bad boys. I'm one of them. Welcome to the club, right? Number one. I think number two, I think that, and this is important, is that what you said there that is an important part of it. Trump went there, MSNBC, CNN, they attacked him, blah, blah, blah. All the neocons, the liberal institutions, and et cetera, all attacked him, right? The last time, because they had some horsepower. They got no horsepower now. He's crushed them all. MSNBC and CNN are trying to figure out how they're going to stay on the air. They're like sending Morning Joe over to Trump to kiss his ring and hang out with him at Mar-a-Lago. They're trying to figure out how they can become friends with Trump because he's put them out of business. He's put them out of business. Right? Even if they make a lot of noise about Trump, it won't matter because nobody's watching anyway. What are they going to do? Put it on CNN? Who the hell watches CNN? Nobody. So he has crushed them. He has won in a way that the Democrats could never even imagine. The black vote, the youth vote, the Latino vote. You know what I mean? They're all like, we're tired of you people. We're moving on, right? They were very practical. All of the, we were told black voters only vote for Democrats because of racism or sexism or something like that. And Latinos, why there's immigrants, they'll never vote for Trump. And all of these groups will never vote for Trump. And when it came down to it, this is the way I always put it, they all looked at it and said, when I go to the grocery store, this is the price of lettuce. It doesn't say this is the price of lettuce for females. This is the price for trans people, black people. No, this is the price of lettuce. And it's too high. And I don't like that. So we'll try some other guy. Maybe he can lower the price of lettuce. There's a genocide going on. We don't like that. We're not, there was a dynamic created where when it came down to it, the people of of the US did what I always expected them to do. They voted on practical matters, not this philosophical, cultural, moral bull crap that they put together now to make up to as the foundation of the Democratic Party. They just said, hey, we can try to live a little better life and we'll give this guy a shot. So Trump has so much power right now. I think a lot of those institutions will get a big lesson if they try to go after him. Because right now, if you think about this though, and a lot of people don't think about this. Okay, here's the dynamic. Trump said, hey, you vote for me, I'm going to end the war in Ukraine. And the Democrats said, vote for us, we'll keep it going. And he won in a blowout. Blew him out. And even this is what's so bad. New York City. Yeah, the Democrats win. Trump got 3 times the votes that he got before in New York City. So even in the places where they won, the cities where they won, the places that are traditionally all blue, they took a beating. They may have won, but a lot of them, they didn't win by much. So basically, they know they're done, they're toast, right? Okay. The people said, we want peace. That's what the American people said. We don't want a war with Russia. We don't want a war with Ukraine. Get us out of this mess. Okay. So if Trump says, okay, I'm working on getting us out of this mess, the people will be, hooray, wonderful. If these same institutions that have been rejected by the American people once again say, we're going to fight Trump, the American people are going to be on Trump's side here. All of them. I mean, not all of them, but the machine literally has to say, We don't want to stop the war that the American people voted to stop. It's only going to hurt them and deteriorate them even worse. So if Trump goes for some kind of a deal, it'll have to be a deal that the machine won't like because the Russians are winning. The facts on the ground say if you're winning, the Russians don't need a deal. They'd like to get one because they want peace. We need a deal. The Europeans need, everybody else needs a deal. So to get a deal, he's going to have to give up some things that the neocons and the people in charge don't want. And when he does that, they're going to go bananas, but the American people will be like, yeah, we're all for that. So if Trump is smart enough to do things like the famous fireside chats of FDR, you know what I mean? Have a talk with the American people, go on and say, look, we're going to get peace. This is dangerous. This is going to be World War III. I told you if you voted for me, I'd get you out of this. You voted for me. Now I'm going to get you out of it. I need your support. I got to give the Russians this, 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 and this. American people, support me on this. If he does that, the American people say, do what you got to do, Donald Trump. We don't give a crap what you do. Ukraine is not Chicago. Okay. It's not Boise, Idaho. That's what we're worried about. So I think if he plays it properly, he can get us a deal. I think he wants to get a deal. And I also, here's something Trump said. I remember this. I listened to it. He said, they said, well, what about China and the EVs and all this stuff? He said, look, if China wants to sell cars here, they need to build factories here and put the American people to work. And then they can they can sell cars here. You know what I say? That sounds like Garland Nixon being president. Because I would say I don't have a problem with it as long as the American workers get a job out of the deal. Russia, you got stuff to sell. How can we turn that into jobs for the American people? That we sell things to Russia, we buy things for Russia. So if Trump looks at this and says, how can I create jobs for the American people? Through these relationships, it's not just, hey, I want to be palsy with Vladimir Putin so I can come over there and hang out and have a shot of vodka and some borscht. It's I want to have a relationship with the leader of Russia so that we can do things that enhance the economic strength of the American workers, the American people. People be behind it 100%. So I think he's going to do some things that I'm going to go, oh God, Trump, how can you do that? But he's going to do he's kind of at least trying to move in a direction that's far better than the lunatics we have here. So I never thought that I would see that, but I never thought I'd go to Baltimore and see a bunch of black guys riding around with Trump stickers on their cars either. So never thought I'd see that. So there are a lot of things happening that I never thought I'd see. I don't know. Um, but I think his relationship with the leaders of various countries that have been demonized will move in a positive direction and will be better for everybody in the world.
Yeah, he calls Kim Jong-un from North Korea his friend, his
Yeah.
buddy. Same thing with President Xi in China and Putin. But I want to stay on the topic of Ukraine and Russia and the relationship with Vladimir Putin. I'm sure you're aware in the last week or so, there's been some new language that's been added to what Russia expects from the end of the Ukrainian conflict. They say what's happened on the ground is non negotiable. 5 locations have returned to Russia, non negotiable. They're saying there are 3 goals: demilitarization, denazification, and never, no, never, no, ever, Ukraine and NATO. There's no discussion. But they've added something else, Garland. Both Putin and Lavrov have said there have been broken promises going back to Gorbachev and the promise they made to not move 1 inch towards Russia, 1 inch east. And then there's been the broken promises of Minsk 1 and Minsk 2. Now, this is different language. I've been reading that and I'm going, whoa, Russia has been claiming that the advance of NATO to some, whatever it is, 23 countries now, and many of the former Soviet republics, they're trying to get into Moldova and Georgia right now, to turn them against, and Armenia, to turn Armenia against Russia. Um, I'm wondering if this is going to be a bargaining chip for Russia. Okay, NATO, pull back, get off of our borders, get out of the Arctic, get out of Finland and Sweden and Norway. I'm just wondering if that's what Russia is thinking about in terms of bargaining with Donald Trump and the West. What are your thoughts?
I think one of the things they're doing, and it's brilliant, it's something that Donald Trump does, and that is you always start off with maximalist demands, right? And Trump does that. He'll say, we want to do something, and it'll be so over the top, and people will go, my God, Trump, that's mad. He starts off way over here, right? So maximalist, and then he pulls back some and he gets to deal with maybe what he wanted anyway. So I think what the Russians, that's a wish list for the Russians. I don't think it's a I don't think it's a deal breaker that, but I think it's a wish list, and I think they're going to start off because they got a strong hand, wisely so, with maximalist demands. We're going to start here. Number one, you get the hell everything back to Germany, the west of Germany. Everything west of the English Channel. Let's start there, and then we'll creep, we'll work on that. So I think I'm with them. I think one of the things Russia's doing now, and this is wise. They're really Lavrov and those people are smart people. They know that very shortly they're going to, if all works out, they'll be in a situation for negotiating. And I think they're setting the table for that. I think they're setting the table on the battlefield in that they're really, seeing on the battlefield, what do we need to take? What situation, when Trump comes in, we want to put the Ukrainians in a situation where they're very, very pressured, where the Ukrainian people feel pressured to pressure their people to get, you know what I mean? So they're setting the table up. And part of the setting the table up is saying, we want everything, and then we'll bargain backwards from that. I think that's a good thing. I think this, and this is also critical. To me, the most critical part of the deal is not the deal. And it's exactly what they just said. And it is, you lied to us every single time. Why should we trust you for a deal? Right. So, and which is what they're really saying. When they say, look, you lied to us. What about Minsk? What about this? You've lied every single time. Tell me why I should trust you for a deal. I shouldn't. Which means the important part of the deal is not the deal. It's what mechanisms will be put in place to ensure the longevity of the deal. That's the only, all of us know, you and I know that that's what matters. We're all looking at it like, yeah, and the Russian people, everybody's looking at it saying, yeah, yeah, yeah. You get a deal with Trump. 4 weeks, 4 days, 4 hours later, it's been blown. These people don't keep their deals. But I will guarantee you this, for quite some time, Lavrov and Putin's people have been putting together a plan saying, because they do want to do, they want peace. I will guarantee you they're very smart people. And you and I, Regis, if we were in charge, what would we do? We'd look a year out. We way before we'd say one of these days, we're going to have to negotiate for a deal. And when we do, we're going to need some mechanisms in place to ensure that these untrustworthy people are held accountable and are forced to hold their deal. And that's what the insiders in Russia have been working on. What, if anything, can we do? Okay. So the part of the talk is now to remind the people on the other side, to remind everybody involved before we start talking, to remind everybody, we don't trust you to keep your word. And the reason that we don't trust you comes from a historical context. You did lie here, you did lie here, you did lie in all these places, so we don't trust you. That being said, since all of us know we don't trust you and all of us know that you lied, let's be honest about how we come up with a way that everybody feels comfortable that this deal, because no matter what deal we get, if we're not comfortable that you're going to keep your word, we don't have a deal. So I think that the Russians right now, you keep listening to them over the next 20 days, and you will start to hear them set the table for the kind of things they're going to need, the kind of things they're going to ask for. I don't really believe at this point that they're going to say, this is what we need to ensure the longevity of the deal. I think they'd be, and if I were them, here's what I'd do. I'd wait till I got a deal, till I got real close to a deal, right? And I would say, and I would try to include the things that I need for longevity as part of the deal, rather than say, I got a deal, and so now what are we going to do to make sure that it lasts? I include those things as an intricate part of the deal. So in the end, when you sign off that deal, I may have to tweak it and add a few things that drop at the very end. But for the most part, when you sign off on that deal, I have already included the things in the deal that would make it last. And I can throw a few last more ones on you that even if I don't get those, I can live with them. So I think, as you can tell, watching the foreign policy experts of the Russian government, from based on what I've seen, I think they're really smart, and I think they're probably 10 steps ahead of the kind of things that I'm saying. So that's why, again, I think they can get a deal, not as much because of Trump having a bunch of geniuses, but because he wants a deal and because the Russian leadership is really smart. And if they want a deal, I think they'll find a way. In the end, because they don't have to have one, they can just keep fighting.
Garland, we've been talking about a deal between Trump, the United States, and Russia. Now, I've been living here for 5 years. I've been following it very carefully. Uh, you know, the special military operation, the war in Ukraine, which is a war. It's not a proxy war, it's a direct war of the United States against Russia with the stated goal of inflicting a strategic defeat on Russia. Now, all that Russia has ever been asking is to have its sovereign security guaranteed, promised. Now, Garland, what's been happening every year have been massive U.S. orchestrated NATO war games all along Russia's borders. They've also been staging these war games in the Arctic. The United States, right now, with Sweden and Finland joining NATO, the United States is already building military bases there because they see the Arctic, which is melting, is a new frontier for them to be able to rape and pillage Russia's resources. When you look at a map of the Arctic, and I just came back from the Arctic, and you look at the map, is almost all Russian. So Russia has only been asking for guarantees to its legitimate security interests. And this is where, Garland, I'm wondering if Trump is going to understand that and is going to respect it, not as a politician, as a businessman, and somebody who would like to reestablish relationships with Russia. In my opinion, for that to happen, Donald Trump is going to have to promise to Vladimir Putin, we will no longer deny you your international law guaranteed, United Nations principles guaranteed of your security. What are your thoughts?
Couple of things. You brought up a couple of things. One being, and to me, this is what you've magnified, the internal conflict of the U.S. Because what we have now is people in America have overwhelmingly voted for a guy because they want something different, right? Number one, they want peace, and they made it clear they want Trump to bring that. Number two, they want prosperity. Well, imagine that. People wanting, well, everyday people wanting peace and prosperity, right? And this is what our whole conversation is about. Now, as we discussed, Donald Trump is a transactional guy. He's a businessman. If me and you are doing business, we both know you got to walk away and make a little profit. I got to walk away and make a little profit. And we're going to negotiate over who maybe gets a bigger bite of the apple, but everybody's got to walk away with something or we won't have a business deal, right? Okay, that's one way of viewing the world, but he's dealing with the neocons whose view of the world is complete and total domination. You will do what I tell you to do or else. We even recently we found out that Kamala Harris was talking to the guys from the Teamsters Union, and she said, "We will win with you or without you. You better get on board and you better, shaking their finger, right? That's the mentality of them for the world. Dominate. You will give me what I want. I will take everything that you have. You have no say." As opposed to a Trump that says, "Hey, you know what? We all got to eat. Let's make a business deal. We can all walk away with something." That and the American people that are saying we're better, we're better with this transactional stuff because we don't want any conflict. So what we're talking about here is the internal conflict of the U.S., the people of the US versus the ruling elite, who are a bunch of fascists and sociopaths and thieves and pirates. And the American people, they want a more peaceful existence. So Vladimir Putin once talked about a president of the United States, right? And when they get in power, a bunch of guys with black suits and briefcases and solemn looks on their face takes them in the back room and says, "This is the way things are," right? Is that what's going to happen here? And is Trump going to buy it? Because in a way, he doesn't have to, because the American people have made it clear we would prefer your at least the way you're viewing things over the way the guys in the suits viewing things. So the question becomes what Trump wants and the internal fight he has to have to get it. Because I think Trump would be fine with the Arctic. Hey, look, he'd look at the Arctic and say, "Hey, what's in it for us? Can we make a deal, Putin? Hey, maybe there's some oil over here. We'll drill this oil. You get that." He'd make a deal. Transactional. He'd make a damn deal with anybody if we could get the better end of it. The neocons just want total domination. They don't care if it costs us everything. So we're gonna be watching a fight, and it ain't gonna be a fight between Trump and Putin. It's gonna be a Trump, but between Trump and the neocons here. Um, again, as we get closer to the 20th, it's going to get more and more dangerous because see, one of the things that it's obvious the neocons, the Biden people are trying to do is to create a dynamic where Trump can't do any of those things. The things that there's things he would do I don't like, but the things that he would do that I would like and the American people, they're doing everything they can. And the question is, what do they have up their sleeve? What terrorist attack? What God only knows what they're going to do? How far will they go to try to stop him? All of these issues that we're talking about, be they the Arctic and Finland and Sweden, are the result of the um, neocon mentality of fascist domination of the world. So I hope Trump gets in the 2020 on the 20th, and then we can sit there and watch that fight start. Um, and the other thing I think is this. Let me add one other thing. I think it's smart for Trump to use some what do you call it? Like he's using this guy Kellogg, right? And different people. I think that's smart. Because if Trump just goes over and meets with everybody and all, they can attack Trump. Oh, he's this, he's terrible, blah, blah, blah. In using envoys and using other people, he deflects some of that. And then Trump can say, "Well, I sent my envoy over there, and my envoy was able to get a good deal. And I'm going to go along with what my envoy said." Now, he can tell the damn envoy, "You will do what I tell you to do." But in the end, it allows him to spread the love, shall we say, a little bit and say to this mainstream machine, if you're not just going to be able to attack me and say I'm bad, you're going to have to attack a whole lot of people who have said, "You're going to have to attack my envoy who got the deal." And all these other people are saying, "Okay, the deal's, yeah, we can take that deal." So just get me to the 20th and we'll talk. But I think if the neocons can't create an environment that completely stops Donald Trump from being able to meet with the Russians and do anything, then they got their but that would have to be so over the top that God only knows what would happen. So I don't know if I answered the question, but I gave it a shot.
No, I really appreciate your take on how people in America are fed up with what has been going on. I think I could agree. As someone, an American who's looking at it from here, that the American people were really pissed off. They're angry at what has been happening. They're angry at what's going on in the grocery store, what's going on at the gas pump. They're angry at what's going on at all the divisions that have been created between them and everybody else in the United States. So I really appreciated your take on Donald Trump as a transactional person. Uh, I haven't followed it really very, very closely, but I have followed it enough to know that to make America great again is a huge promise. It appeals to a lot of people that I'm going to bring back jobs. I'm going to protect our borders. I'm going to make sure that we have fair trade relationships with everybody. I mean, this is appealing to anybody. It's appealing to me who's sitting over here in Russia. I mean, that makes sense. It makes sense to my father used to say, Americans vote their pocketbook. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. But I found it interesting the way you described what Trump is doing is sending his envoys, his representatives to different countries to begin to, I think, look for feelers. Uh, and I found that interesting. I also agree with you that I think those people who are in power now, call them neocons, call them Zionists, whatever you want to call them, are doing everything they can to make it impossible for Trump to do anything. You mentioned in the beginning, you wondered if he was even going to be able to take office. Uh, I thought after the assassination attempts of this past year that Trump represented such a threat to the ruling elite who have been in power now for a long time, if they would do the unthinkable and try to take him out. But let's assume that they don't. We're talking about Trump wanting to make a deal. This is his whole thing, the art of the deal. I hope, and I'm going to want your added view on this, your added take. The Russians simply want two things. It's all they've ever wanted. The security of their borders, their national security, to be safe, to be free, to be not under attack by United States short and long range missiles all over Europe. And the second thing that Russia has always wanted was respect. And this is part of the Western dilemma, in my opinion. They have never given Russia respect for their culture, an amazing, deep, rich culture, which I've discovered, for their history, what they have had to suffer over hundreds of years, continued attacks and onslaughts from everybody. The Swedes have invaded here, the French, Hitler. I mean, this is all deeply ingrained in the Russian psyche, in their recent history, which says to them they don't respect us. And I've done a lot of reading on this, that there's been this mentality in the West that these Slavs are somewhat less than human. They're not Western, they're Asian, they're Mongols. Uh, so I get back to the point that I'm saying Russia wants its national security guaranteed by legal requirements. And number two, Russia has always, for hundreds of years, just wanted to be respected. What are your thoughts?
I think two things. I think Russia has kind of like I had a friend of mine who, when his dad passed away, we were very close, and I know they didn't have a good relationship. And he was telling me how, yeah, after my dad died, I realized that I spent my whole life trying to get something that I would never get, approval from my dad. He says, and I should have gave up long ago, but I didn't realize until he died that it was a waste of time, that just wasn't who his dad was, right? Okay, here's my point. I think Russia's position is now, look, the Africans, the South Americans, people, the Asian Pacific, they all love us. What do we need you people for? If you don't, you know what I mean? I think it's going to become like, look, we've tried and tried and tried to get along with the Westerners. We've tried to get respect from you people. We've said we'll be friends with you. We called you our partners, but no, everything we've done, you stuck a knife in our stinking backs. I think the Russian leadership's position is going to be, you know what? Just get off our back. Here's what we want. We're not going to allow you to hold a knife at our throat anymore, right? You can't hold a knife at our throat anymore in Ukraine, Georgia, on our border. Sorry, that those days are over. We don't need you other than that. We're going to do business with the rest of these countries. They want to sell our stuff. They want to visit us. They respect us. They like us. We have a long history with them. We'll be friends with the rest of these people. You guys do whatever the hell you want to do. Just you're not going to be allowed to hold a knife to our throats. And I think that's where Russia is. And I think it's wise. And I think they've had enough of these clowns. And it's like this. Why do I need you to respect me if I don't respect you? I mean, did you see the Paris Olympics intro? You know what I mean? You're like, what? Really? If that's your culture. I mean, your culture used to be baguettes and berets, B&B. Hey, baguettes are delicious, berets are kind of cool. So hey, we're okay with baguettes and berets. But now that's Paris. No thanks. I think the Russians are like, look, we'll open our doors. Anybody that's had enough of that crap, you can come hang out with us, which are a lot of people, but we don't want any parts of it. So I think the Russians are actually, not only are they saying, we don't want your respect, they're saying you're the laughing stock of the world. People are looking at you, they're laughing at you, they're shaking their heads, you're looking like a bunch of stinking clowns. So I think Russia, the respect part, Russia has lost all respect for the likes of Paris, and they're just going to be like, yeah, we'll move on. What's interesting is Trump hates those people too, and they hate him. That's the interesting thing about it. He hates them and they hate Trump.
I'm sitting here laughing. I'm loving it. Listen, you know what? On the one hand, you sound like a Russian propagandist, a Putinista. You sound like a Kremlin asset. But I think it's going to be very refreshing for a lot of people to hear that. Uh, and you're right. What Russia has done uh, has rejected in 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 many public statements, they've rejected the perversion of Western values. And it's actually against the law in Russia to promote and to proselytize transgenderism, gay, LGBTQ. It's okay to be gay. It's never been against the law, but we are not going to allow you to proselytize. We're not going to allow you to share this information with our young people and our children because Russia really has rejected categorically these Western liberal values, as they call them. I see that in my daily life from the friends that I have here. Uh, so that's very interesting. Um, so Garland, let me shift back now to United States domestic problems and Donald Trump. Now, everybody knows, and people here in Russia know, he has threatened to deport millions of illegal aliens, he calls them, illegal immigrants. I don't have a problem with him finishing the wall. Okay, I have no problem with that. And I don't doesn't bother me if I'm going to offend friends or whatever, but borders need to be respected. You can look at Europe right now, and Europe has been inundated with the refugees from America's wars all over the Middle East and Central Asia. and they don't know how to deal with the problem. It's become a huge, not only political, but cultural and economic drain on all of Europe, from Great Britain all the way to Russia's borders. So, domestically, what do you think Trump is going to be able to accomplish? Do you think he's going to be able to deport 1 million people? Do you think that he's going to be able to bring back jobs from China and from Europe, Germany? That's all the talk. That Germany's economy has been so damaged that their companies are looking to come to the United States. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I'm reading. So domestically, do you think Trump has a chance to solve some of these problems and to unify America?
Well, he's got a chance, but you pointed out some interesting contradictions that Donald Trump is going to run into, right? And that is, the idea, the argument that all of these immigrants are just coming to our border because they want the advantages of America. Well, yeah, you can make that argument, but exactly as you said, these neocons go destabilize entire regions of the world. And when the people from those regions end up fleeing war and all kinds of crazy stuff and destabilization, they end up on our borders. And we end up the everyday people have to deal with the results of these ruling elite lunatics who have destabilized the country. And now a million people from that country are at our border. Here's the contradiction. Trump, oh, we're going to do more sanctions on whatever, Venezuela. And where the hell are the people from Venezuela when you sanction their country even worse and cause greater poverty and destabilization? They will head straight to the border. There's a reason there's a bunch of Venezuelans at the border because the United States sanctioned 99% of Venezuela's income away. And now Venezuela is starting to come back with the help of Russia and China and even, to be quite frank, Turkey, but Iran. Okay. So they're coming back with the help of others. But Donald Trump has done everything he can, and he will try to destabilize Cuba and Nicaragua. Donald Trump doesn't want to trouble with the big ones, but he wants to beat the hell out of the little countries, right? So he's going to say a contradiction with Trump. He's going to say, yes, we want to do something about the border, but his foreign policy will exacerbate the problem. So no, I don't think Donald Trump is going to be able to say, I'm going to cause greater destabilization in Latin America and the Caribbean, and I'm going to stop the migration, that illegal migration that started as a result of the destabilization in those areas. So that's the area where Donald Trump's going to have to face the music, and he's going to have a problem, and it's not going to work. You can shut the door. And now here's the next thing. All right, okay. I take 1 million people and I send them to country X. They're going to come right back to the border. Our border's way too big. You can stop them here, you can stop them there. You build a wall, they'll build a dig under it, or they'll put a ladder over it. They'll find some place to get around. So the truth of the matter is, it's not feasible in a country of 300 million to sift out and find those undocumented immigrants, house by house, job by job. It ain't going to be easy to find them. And if you do, they'll end up coming right back. I don't know how many times we've had this instances where they show where they arrested an illegal immigrant. They were deported 8 months ago and they came right back to the border. So what are you doing? Sending them? It's what? See, you got to the core of the problem, and I'm glad you did. If you don't deal with the destabilization of regions in your immediate area, you're not going to stop the flow of immigrants from those regions. Immigrants, you can call them refugees, you can call whatever you want. So that's the problem Donald Trump's going to have, I think, a contradiction within his own policy. They will not ever accept that the reason that these immigrants are showing up is because we destabilize their countries and their regions. And guess what? Syria, bad news for the Europeans. With the mess they got in Syria, there'll be more refugees coming from the Middle East. And when this Ukraine thing falls apart, a lot of the Banderites are going to want to head west. And the people who are refugees or whatever you call it in Europe right now, who are Ukrainians, they ain't going to want to come home. So they've created a disaster. They'll have refugees coming from Ukraine on one side, coming from the Middle East and Africa on the other side. The Europeans are going to get squeezed hard, and I think Donald Trump's policies for the border and immigration, while I 100% agree that you cannot have a country without secure borders. You can't, if you've got a problem in your brain that needs a operation and you take Tylenol, that ain't gonna fix the problem. It's just gonna mask it. And he's trying to fix a head, he's trying to fix a brain aneurysm with Tylenol. He's got to get to the core problem. What did the Russians keep talking about? We have to address the core problems that created this Ukraine conflict. Is not facing the core problems of regional destabilization that are creating the flood of refugees. You ain't gonna stop the flood of refugees. So that's my feelings on Donald Trump's immigration policies.
All right, now let me ask you about uh, not necessarily foreign policy, although that's obviously connected. Uh, the Department of War, Department of Defense budget. Uh, what are his policy views, if any, on some 800 or 900 military bases scattered over 90 countries? Uh, do you think that he's going to want to make America safe by continuing to fund all of those bases? I mean, this is billions and billions of dollars a year. Or do you think that he's going to want to bring some of them home to protect our own borders, which is what the military is supposed to do in the first place, to protect our national borders and national security? Do you have any idea what his views might be on all of those military bases showing strength and
There's
intimidation around the world?
Well, there are a couple of, again, there are some contradictions within Donald Trump's rhetoric and his policies. One of them being the last time he bragged, we've got a $2 trillion military, as if the amount of money you spend on it makes it better. It's the difference between a woman who buys a purse for $100 that's a really nice leather purse that's really good. The other woman buys the same exact purse, but it has Gucci on it and it's $2,000. Just because you spent more don't mean you have a better purse. It just means you have a bigger price tag on it and somebody else made a lot more money profit. And that's what our military is, right? But I don't think, but Donald Trump, and he always says we got to be strong, the strongest country in the world. So one of the problems is Donald Trump's worldview is one of strong and tough around the world. And I think that he will definitely continue to pump money into the military. Again, a contradiction. It's hard. It's going to be hard to find the money that you need to fix America when you got so much money going into the military and you're not going to get the debt under control. See, the only way what they would what they and what I suspect Ramaswamy and what's his name will say is, okay, we've spent so much money, we've spent too much, we got to cut, we got to make some cuts. Where are you going to cut? Oh, let's cut from the poor and the working class. That's what they're going to do. They spend all of this money on tax cuts for the rich. They spend all of this money on wars, and then when they've overspent, they're going to say somebody's got to take a haircut. Who is it? The working class. You know what I mean? Oh, we've got to cut back on Social Security. These darn working class people. So that's the game that is out there. So we will see how that works out. But again, there's problems and contradictions in. So how do you make things better economically in the United States without cutting the military budget? I don't see how you do that. So the bottom line is, there's some holes in Trump's swing. Um, and one of them is he'll continue heavy spending on military, and I think that's going to really inhibit his ability to do some of the other things he wants. Although, let me say this, one of the things he talked about before was, hey, let's get the troops out of Korea because it's too expensive. I think you will see one thing that you'll see an argument from Trump, whether it's Korea or Europe, is it's too expensive to keep our troops here. You're going to have to pay us to keep our troops here or we won't. What he doesn't seem to realize is that the war machine wants the troops there, whether they pay us or not, and they're perfectly happy with all the corruption and money laundering that fills their stinking pockets to keep them there. So I don't know where that goes. We can keep an eye on it and continue to discuss it. But I only got a couple more minutes anyway. I got to go in a few.
You mentioned Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk and their Dodge, the Department of Government Efficiency, areas they're going to look at. I read where they're going to look at the Department of Education, the FBI, Homeland Security, the Internal Revenue Service. You were mentioning that looking at probably taking money away from Social Security, from the what's left of the social safety net. But I wonder if they're not going to do that. I wonder, in your opinion, if they're going to go after some of these big budget items, including the military. That'll be very interesting to see from my perspective. What are your thoughts?
Well, what's interesting is Bernie Sanders came out recently and said, hey, if they want to go after the Pentagon budget, I'm in. So what's interesting is I'm not one of, the most popular thing that they could do would be go after the Pentagon budget. What element would be against that? What demographic, what group could you find in this country that would say, no, we don't want you to go after the Pentagon budget? So it would be interesting to see if they say that, if they can actually get away with it. But that would be the most popular thing that any president could do would be to go after the Pentagon budget. But it would also be one of the most dangerous things any president could do. So we should see. We shall see. The machine's going to push back heavy, but I don't see how. I put it like this: if Trump says he wants to go after the Pentagon budget, the MAGA people and really all of American will cheer behind him. Donald Trump, if he would do that, man, if he would get a deal in Ukraine, if he would um, go after the Pentagon budget, he'd have like the highest approval ratings of any president in history. To go after the Pentagon budget, that would get you some high approval ratings.
Wow. Garland, um, this has been really fascinating for me. I think it will be for a lot of people. Um, we're only 2 days away from the new year, and everybody is saying Happy New Year. Do you think it's going to be a Happy New Year? Let's end on that note.
Well, we got 20 days. That's 20 days. I'm counting that down every day, like a prisoner, like putting the days on the cell where you cross one out every day. That's the way I feel, like a prisoner of the Biden regime. And maybe like the fake guy in Syria, maybe we'll come out and say we haven't eaten in 4 days, and the fake CNN guy with Clarissa Ward. So I'll be a fake prisoner for 20 days. So I say we hold out, we keep an eye on, and if we all make it safely to January 20th and Trump gets in office, I think it's going to be important for all of us in the alternative media. I think we have an important job. All of us in the alternative media have an important job. And I feel like we're up to it and that we can advocate for the policies that we want. That's what we're going to need to do. And I feel positive about the direction things are going.
Uh, I want to end on that note, and I agree with you. You mentioned earlier MSNBC, CNN, Fox, Washington Post, the New York Times, they're all close to going out of business. The American people, it's been proven, have no respect for the mainstream media. And where are they now beginning to look for their information? To people like you, little guys like me, anybody who's doing whatever they can to get this other message across and to help people try to figure out what is really going on. I think I am hopeful for that, Garland, in spite of all the censorship, all the shadow banning. I mean, it's happened to you. You're a big time viewer, media source. I used to have thousands of viewers. I don't have them anymore. I mean, I'm being shadow banned, but I don't have as big a voice as you had. But it's not how many, Garland. In my opinion, it's who. Who is listening and who is doing something with it. I want to thank you so much, Garland, for everything you've been doing. You've obviously captured the imagination of a lot of people. You've done great work. It's been a privilege for me to know you, to have you on the show. I'll look forward to having you back again.
All right. I'm all for that. Just let me know. And no problem. Love to come and I enjoy your work.
Happy New Year.
Yes, that's what we're pushing for. 20 days and counting.